First of all, my name is Scott Oberle. I've been associated with Dave's photo class for quite some time, and I want to say that I really appreciate the opportunity to do this. It's going to be kind of fun. It's a tough act to follow. Brian Crow was one of my first friends when I joined the group, and he's a wonderful photographer, and I'm really kind of honored to follow him. Anyhow, as far as myself, I'm a California guy forever. I was born in North Hollywood in the San Fernando Valley and lived there most of my life up until the time I got married and moved down to Orange County. I am married to my wife Joyce 46 years, so we have 4 adult children and 9 grandchildren, and we spend an awful lot of our time doing things with them. I taught school for 36 years, primarily U.S. history and earlier photography and later computers. I also worked in a grocery store. We discovered when we had children that my wife was better at being a parent than I was, and I was better at being a worker than she was. So we worked out an agreement where I'd have 2 jobs and she'd take care of the kids. And it worked out quite well because the kids turned out really, really neat. Everyone lives relatively close to us, so we can spend a lot of time with the grandkids, spoiling them. I also enjoy very much riding road bicycles. I usually get in 400 or 500 miles a month, and between that and the photography, it leaves very little time for things like mowing the lawn and stuff like that. At any rate, I've been retired for about 6 years, and I'm able to spend my time doing what I want, and it's a good life. I had a photography class that I took in high school, which was just real basic black and white, and I don't remember too much of it, except it was kind of fun. You got to go in the darkroom and mess with all those chemicals and things, but I really didn't do anything with it. The first thing I can remember about photography was on our honeymoon in 1964. As part of it, we drove through Yosemite. Well, it was in August, and I didn't know anything about Yosemite, but I wondered what all the fuss was about because it was a dry year and there was no water and just cliffs and things. But I remember we went into the Ansel Adams Gallery, which is located in the village, and I was stunned by the quality of the black and white work that he did. And I thought in my brashness that, it can't be that tough. I'm going to learn to do that. And so I trotted out and got a couple books, and I went out and bought a Hasselblad camera, and I spent a whole lot of time, and I realized it just wasn't going to be as easy as I thought it was. Eventually, I got somewhat proficient with his zone system, which is what he called his process, where you pre-visualize your print before you take it. You basically know your tonal range, light to dark in the image, and you develop accordingly. And I did that for a time when we bought our first house. One of the first things we did is my dad, who was pretty handy, came over and we put a darkroom in the garage so I could do that. I also was able to, when I first started teaching, make a darkroom at our school. They had a really neat kitchen, which in the days of cutbacks was one of the first things to go. And so there was this big kitchen with stainless steel sinks and all kinds of cool stuff. The only drawback was I remember it had about a 4-foot skylight. And after taping up probably 20 layers of red cellophane, we had one of the world's largest safe lights. But I was able to teach a full class in that, and I taught that for probably 10 or 15 years. And it was always a lot of fun. It was just strictly basic black and white. But it was very enjoyable, and the kids liked it. And a couple of them went on to do good things with their craft. As far as what I might do differently, I thought about that, and I really can't think of anything. I have always had photography as a hobby, so I haven't had the pressure of having to earn money from it. I've been able to take what I want, shoot what I want, and do exactly what I want with it. The only thing that perhaps I would rather have had is more money so I could buy more toys, but that all worked out well. Wife has been very supportive of my hobby. She has one that's pretty expensive too. But I've just done what I wanted to do, and that's I think that's important, and that's probably why I still like to do it, because if I had pressure to do it for a job, I don't know that it would be quite so much fun. For aspiring photographers, I've been asked in the past what I would recommend, and it's really tough because with the advent of digital, photography has gotten to be a real tough field. I would say just in general, work to develop your craft. That's the first thing. You've got to be good, and that doesn't really ensure anything, but it does give you a leg up. You've got to be good, and you've got to develop a niche of something that you enjoy shooting. Photographers seem to be making money these days in service things. Wedding photography is not going to go away. Brian Crow, who I mentioned, does sports photography, things like Little League and soccer and things like that. Those are all viable fields. What's tough, though, is the fine art field. It used to be that you'd go and you'd buy something by a nice photographer, a big print, hang it up on the wall. Well, nowadays you can take a little point and shoot and take a picture yourself on vacation and go to take it to Costco, and for $10 you've got an 11 by 14, which is really pretty darn good quality, and that's tough to compete with. So in effect, a lot of times when you buy a piece of artwork, you're paying for a signature, because most people can do something that's pretty darn good. I find more and more that your big name photographers are leading workshops. That's where they're making money. They're not making money selling prints or necessarily selling books, but they're leading workshops. And I've been able to, over the past few years, take some workshops with some of the big name people, and some of it rubs off, and I've gotten better because of it. But they're not making that much money selling prints anymore. It's all service kind of stuff. So it's a tough field if you go into it. You be good and you develop something that you really enjoy, and slowly, little by little, you'll get to be well known, and hopefully in the olden days it was about the time they died that they got famous. Hopefully you'll make it before then. As far as favorite gear and accessories go, a number of years ago, I was shooting Canon film cameras, and my wife's brother was a big Nikon shooter, and he did really neat stuff. And so I decided I'd like a Nikon, so I had wife get me a Nikon for Christmas. And little did I realize that once you buy that first lens, you're pretty much locking yourself into a system. So while I shoot Nikon now, it's really no better than Sony or Canon or any of the other good systems. It's just a tool, and it depends on the craftsman. To go along with my camera, I have a wide number of lenses. I also will use Nik software. I use pretty much Photoshop Lightroom and Photoshop itself just as an adjunct. I use, in conjunction with the camera, I use Stingray filters. I've got a couple filters that I'll show later. I find a polarizer to be critical and a neutral density filter to be critical, but nothing really too fancy. I use Really Right Stuff support materials. Their tripod, and I'll show you some of their other stuff a little bit later. But it's all pretty standard stuff. It tends to get pretty pricey if you're buying pro-level things, but especially in the case of a tripod. Somebody wrote an article about the amount of money you spend on tripods over the course of a career, and they're spot on. If you start with a low-level tripod that works, you're going to buy another tripod, a little bit better tripod, and a little bit better tripod. And I'm on about my third tripod right now, and I finally got one that's going to last me for forever. I'm not putting any more money in tripods. What I want to do now is tell you about some of my favorite sites and resources and things like that. And there will be a page associated with this to where the stuff will be written down. So if you don't get it all right now, it'll be there. I really enjoy taking trips. I tend to be more of a trip photographer. I do very little stuff around the house or the neighborhood or the local things, but I do go on several trips a year. I just got back from a week-long llama-assisted backpack to Grand Staircase Escalante, strictly photography. I find when I can immerse myself in this stuff, I do a lot better. I don't have to worry about all the day-to-day things, and it turns out a lot better. This fall, we're going on a trip to Colorado to shoot fall colors, and I'm in the planning stages of a trip with 12 friends to Cuba next January, where we will just be photographing doors and cars and things in the Havana locale. So I really enjoy doing the trip things. My favorite trip sources are the Mountain Light Gallery in Bishop, which was owned by Galen and Barbara Roll before they were killed. They have an excellent program. I've taken trips by the Rocky Mountain outdoor writers and photographers to Estes Park in Rocky Mountain National Park. That's really a great source. That's a week-long thing, and it's very low-key. I've taken courses from Joseph Van Oz. He goes to just amazing locations worldwide. He's gotten to be pretty pricey because he is going to all these amazing locations, but it is pretty cool. There's a new travel site that's just opened up, Visionary Wild, and it's operated by a guy named Justin Black, and he's absolutely fabulous. I did a workshop. He used to work at the Mountain Light Gallery, and I did a workshop a couple of years ago that was run by him and Jack Dykinga through Mountain Light down the length of the Grand Canyon, strictly photography. And he went to work in a Washington think tank, and now he's opened his own travel thing. And I look forward to doing some more stuff with him. In fact, he's setting up Grand Canyon 2 for next spring, and I would hope to be able to make that also. My favorite source probably are two guys that we met kind of by accident. Several years ago, our son was getting married in Mammoth, and he told us that. My first thought was, why Mammoth, And then he mentioned that it was during fall colors. I thought, this is pretty cool. So we went up a week early, and my wife and I were going around shooting fall colors. And one day we were down at a place called McGee Creek, which is just south of Mammoth. And we were wandering aimlessly through the forest looking for pictures in a gale, because it must have been 40, 50-mile winds that day. And if you know anything about aspen trees, that's not good photographic weather. We saw these two guys in the distance carrying tripods. And so we figured, we got tripods, they got tripods. We're all photographers. So we went over and talked to them, and it turned out this was a gentleman named Dan Sniffen, who's out of Fresno, and his friend John Barclay, who works out of Pennsylvania. Dan's an insurance agent, and John is in medical sales. And they get together and do 3 or 4 or 5 trips a year. And they were scouting out a location for a trip the next week. And we really hit it off with them, and since then we've taken at least one trip with them every year. We've been to San Miguel de Allende in Mexico with them. We've been to Bryce and Zion and Page for the slot canyons with them. We've been to Oregon with them. We're going to Colorado with them this year. We're going to do I'm not sure what time it is, but we're going to go next year to New Mexico with them, and they just have absolutely fabulous tours. So that's a little plug for them, and I'll put them on the website too. Great guys, have good websites, tremendous photography. As far as other things, I'm happiest when I'm shooting. My favorite time is when I'm shooting. I don't have any. I like landscape and outdoor photography, but I don't have a preference other than that. My favorite photographic adventure is there isn't one. It's what I'm into the moment, and there's some places that I really like. But the best time for me as a photographer is when I'm actually standing behind the camera and shooting something. And it's a great hobby. I wanted briefly to talk about HDR, high dynamic range photography, and panoramic photography, both of which I really enjoy. And it occurred to me a week or so ago that learning how to do HDR photography is kind of something they're not going to need much in the future. The earthquake in Japan set back camera development probably about a year. The Nikon Professional factory was in Sendai, which was the epicenter of the quake. And so the cameras that we expected this fall will be out probably next fall. But in looking at the specs that people are guessing about, the sensors, the new sensors, are going to be much more sensitive to a wide range of light than they are now. And the reason you do HDR is because a sensor might be able to capture 6 to 8 stops of light between light and dark, and the new ones might be up to 12 or 14. And that gets to be pretty much all you need. At any rate, the HDR now, basically you'll take a series of pictures so that you capture accurately the light areas of the image, and you capture the dark areas of the image, and then using software, either Photomatics or Nik, you stitch them together to wind up with a picture that captures all of that total range. And it's really kind of neat. You can get stuff, a picture like a forest in the sun, where you have shafts of light and you have dark comes to mind. The only way to get that, to capture that, is through HDR. If you don't use HDR, you're going to wind up blowing out your highlights, or you're going to wind up losing your shadows. And so if you become proficient at HDR, which is extremely easy, it's like a lot of things that seem intimidating, but they're pretty much no-brainers because the software does the work. If you get proficient at HDR, you find you can capture a whole lot of images that you couldn't capture before, or that you couldn't capture well before. The other thing I wanted to mention was panoramics. Now, I don't see panoramics changing in the future, so that's something that'll be going on for a while. But with a panoramic, you can take a series of pictures, and usually you'll overlap them about a third. And obviously you have to use a tripod. And you overlap them, and then again, using software, you stitch them together, so you wind up with usually a long, skinny panorama, although you can orient the camera vertically and do it that way. Also, I have a picture that I'll show later that I did that with. But panoramics are really neat because you can get a much wider picture without the distortion that you very often get with a wide-angle lens, and without the wide-angle lens pushing your subject way to the back, far away, and making it small. You can use any lens. You can use a telephoto to do a panoramic, and that way you get something that doesn't distort, and it's captured very well. So I enjoy doing both HDR and panoramics. They both fill a niche that you can't do with the camera on automatic, and I enjoy doing those kind of pictures very much when it needs it. I did bring some panoramics to show also, and so I'll talk about those a little bit. I did bring a couple of pictures that I wanted to talk about to kind of illustrate what I was saying. The first one actually was taken by my wife, which I really, really like. The world was deprived of a really good photographer when she became a quilter, but she still goes on trips, and when we go on a photography trip, she'll shoot, and she comes up with some good stuff. This one was taken in San Miguel de Allende, which is a little Mexican colonial town north of Mexico City. And she put this still life together with stuff that was there, and she went out into town and bought the material and whatnot. I think it's very effective. The thing I wanted to mention about it, though, is this one and the next one we had professionally printed. I normally print my own stuff, but we used a metallic paper. And in person, the metallic paper just really causes the colors to pop, especially the colors in the material and whatnot. And so we have this printed, and it's, 30 by 30 or 35 by 35 hanging over our mantel in our house. And it's really, really a great image, particularly printed on the metallic paper. The next one is one I took a couple of years ago on my Colorado River trip, and this was taken at a place called Nankoweap. Up about halfway up the cliff from the river are some Anasazi granaries, and so we were hiking up there, and the river just unfolded into the distance, and so we had to shoot that. I didn't take much of the granaries, but the river was just captivating. And again, I printed this one on that metallic paper, which next time I buy paper, I'm going to buy a roll of it because it's so spectacular. But the picture was so good because, one, the water is great, but the light was over on the left side, and it was hitting the cliff on the right, which is why it's a little bit bright. And then it was bouncing, it was picking up the red color and bouncing across the chasm and lighting the cliff on the left. So you got this incredibly rich red color. And I absolutely love this picture, and it might be the most favorite picture I've ever done. But it's Colorado River, and it was a great trip. Sorry. The next one is an example of a panorama taken with the tilt-shift lens. And it doesn't look like a panorama because I took it in a vertical format. It's actually 3 images vertically, and when you stitch them together, it becomes almost square. But I use the tilt capacity of the lens to get everything in focus from the rock in the foreground clear to the clouds and the rocks in the background. I think it's a very effective image, and it's a classic example of what you can use that tilt-shift lens for. The next panorama was taken in Zion National Park, the Virgin River, and as I recall, this was probably 4 images, and nothing special. I used the new pan head bracket, which I had to carry up there, and I realized what a beast it is. But it turned out really well. I could not have gotten anything like this with a standard lens because it was so wide it would have distorted. So I probably used in the vicinity of a 50 millimeter or 75 millimeter lens and made a panorama out of it. And it got everything from one side to the other in focus, and it's a real good example of what you can do with a panorama. Now we're in the realm of HDR. I went to a place just about a month ago called White Pocket. Now, White Pocket is in southern Utah, and I can tell you about it because you won't find it. It's south of Grand Staircase Escalante, and it's in, I think I said Utah, it's actually in northern Arizona. And it's a very little known, incredible area. Very difficult to get to. It was about 15 miles of very sandy, very technical 4-wheel drive road off another 30 miles of dirt road. And it's about maybe a half a mile by a quarter mile wide, but I don't know how to describe the formations except to say it looks like maybe somebody took a bowl of icing and mixed up different colors and plopped it on the ground and spread it around. It really defies description. But this is an example of HDR. It was a sunset image. The foreground was in deep shadow, and the sky in the background was very much sunlight. So without doing an HDR, I had no chance of capturing the tonal range in this image. And as you can see, it's all there, the clouds to the foreground. The next one is very similar. Again, between the incredible brightness of the sky and the clouds and the darkness of the foreground, I would not have had a chance without doing an HDR. And it turns out very good. I'm using Nik software for HDR rather than anything else. It's a new program, and I think it does a better job in making an image look not HDR. Some of the early HDR programs gave an HDR-ish look, and Nik tends to not do this. So if I didn't tell you this was an HDR, you probably wouldn't have been able to tell by looking at it. This is another good HDR example taken in the redwoods in Northern California. A very bright sky in the forest with deep, deep shadows. very impossible situation to take without HDR. And you can see with HDR it lightened up the tree, it lightened up the bushes, and it kept the sky in a manageable position. I wanted to say a couple things in the realm of thanks. I became aware of Dave Rosenberger about maybe 6-7 years ago. A lady by the name of Pat Yeaman worked with my wife, and she told us about this photo group that went on trips and whatnot. And so I didn't have a professional home, which in retrospect I think is very important for any photographer. You can bounce ideas off of people and learn new techniques that you wouldn't know otherwise. And so we started coming around and going on trips and taking the class and whatnot. So if you're looking for this group of like-minded individuals to associate with, I really recommend Dave's classes. He's got a beginning class, an intermediate class. The subjects, the curriculum is very flexible. It kind of goes where the class wants it to go. And Dave is a great guy, and he works real hard to make sure everybody has a good time. Been to Yellowstone with him, been to Death Valley with him a couple of times, and we just always have a terrific time. So I do recommend Dave, and I do thank Dave for all his work in this. And then the other person I wanted to thank is Andy Kimmel, who's putting this together. Andy runs the website for the class. It's Photographer to Photographer. And he does a tremendous amount of work on this. Every time I look at it, I'm amazed. I do my own website, and I know how much work it is. And every time I look at it, I'm amazed at what he's done. But he kind of gives the group some cohesion. It's a place to go to find out what's happening. He's got areas where you can go if you're interested in HDR, if you're interested in Canon, interested in Nikon, interested in portraits or whatever. So it's a great website, and I really want to thank Andy for the work that he does on that.